We've got a politician in America who is sharing on social media AI-generated images of himself as a muscle-bound American hero or with his face carved onto Mount Rushmore. And if that feels very familiar, well, that is entirely the point, because this is not Donald Trump. No. This is the California governor, Gavin Newsom, fighting back on Donald Trump's territory. It's being called going dark woke. So is this a media strategy that could help the Democrats fight back? Welcome to Americast.
Americast from BBC News.
Hello, it is Sarah here in the BBC's Washington Bureau.
It's Anthony, sitting next to Sarah here in Washington.
And it is Mariana, aka Misinformation, in the worldwide headquarters in London again, but alone, because Justin's on his holidays.
Now, Mariana, Anthony, you're very well aware that one of the questions our Americasters ask us the most often is, where are the Democrats? What are they doing? Why are they not fighting back against all of the things that Donald Trump is doing? And the answers to that are many and varied, but one has popped up in the form of Gavin Newsom, the California governor, who's always been good at attracting attention, but he has formulated this new strategy, it seems, to take on Donald Trump. I mean, listen to this, for instance. This is what he said before signing the Election Rigging Response Act, which was passed in California in response to Republican plans to redraw the political map in Texas.
We're here because Donald Trump, on January 6th, tried to light democracy on fire, tried to wreck this country, tried to steal an election, as Alex just said, by trying to dial in for 11, almost 12,000 votes. And here we are in open and plain sight before one vote is cast in the 2026 midterm election. And here he is once again trying to rig the system. He doesn't play by a different set of rules. He doesn't believe in the rules. And as a consequence, we need to disabuse ourselves of the way things have been done. It's not good enough to just hold hands, have a candlelight vigil, and talk about the way the world should be. We have got to recognize the cards that have been dealt. And we have got to meet fire with fire.
I think it's really interesting, this fight fire with fire idea applied to the social media realm in particular, because one of the things that Donald Trump has by far exceeded at, certainly compared to his sort of Democratic counterparts, is the ability to use social media to engage people who might otherwise not be that engaged in politics, to reach people through alternative media channels and otherwise. And Gavin Newsom has been one of the first people from the Democratic Party who's actually been trying to do that. You know, this podcast that he started doing, but also posting on social media. So on X, for example, where quite a lot of perhaps more liberal politicians have either been very by the rules, formulaic, quite sort of statement-like, but in that way that is not very exciting and therefore doesn't really get promoted by the recommendation systems, or some of them don't really engage with it in the way they used to at all. He's actually started going very much sort of toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. So there's this one meme that he shared, which it was his press office, which again, these kind of the press office for the governor or any governor are usually kind of quite boring, but they've been sharing things like this meme. It shows Gavin Newsom on the it looks like the cover of Time magazine, and it's like, "Long live the king and a successful Liberation Day, thank you." It's in capitals, which is parodying Donald Trump, obviously almost always writing in capitals, certainly on Truth Social, his site. And this whole king thing, again, has been a huge meme in the MAGA world, the Make America Great Again base. They often have shared memes of Donald Trump in this kind of like king angelic way, and he reshares them and so on and so forth. So it's very much like playing him at his own game and slightly taking the mickey out of it, I guess, but also using it to be like, right, well, we can be like this too. I think that there are positives to that in so much as it gets you the visibility, the eyeballs, and people see you as being able to sort of take a bit of a joke or take, to not be very po-faced or too serious. But the flip side of it is that a lot of the people you're trying to appeal to possibly don't like that strategy very much from Donald Trump. They don't find it's like taking politics seriously, and it might not necessarily appeal to the people he wants. And Donald Trump has kind of already done it. So does it work to just do what he does? Like, do you win over the MAGA base? They're not going to go for Gavin Newsom, surely. I don't know what you guys make of the memes and the capitals, etc.
Satire is difficult, obviously. I mean, it's a fine line to walk, and there's certainly been politicians who have opposed Donald Trump who have tried to do it. I remember Marco Rubio in 2016, when he was running against Donald Trump for the presidential nomination, was making fun of the size of his hands and taking swipes at Trump that way. And there are plenty of others who have done that and ended up demeaning themselves, making themselves smaller by comparison, because Trump was just so uniquely good at the kind of derisive humor and mockery that other politicians just doesn't come naturally to. I will say, looking at this, I mean, it is, as you say, it's pretty sophisticated. I think I've talked to people on the left who have found it amusing. Obviously, they don't think this is a way to actually win, but at least it kind of bucks up the spirit of the base and makes them feel like someone is trying to go toe to toe with Donald Trump. I think there's going to have to be more to it than that. There's obviously going to have to be a positive message, and a message that will connect with voters, because that was the key to Donald Trump. It wasn't just the mockery. In fact, maybe it was even in spite of the mockery that he won. He won because he promised voters that he could make things better and shake things up, and that, that economic message, and that message to kind of the populist base in this country was probably the key to his victory, not being able to write in all caps and picking fights with Rosie O'Donnell or whoever else.
But also, I think that this is a really important point, which is all of this social media strategy is across the board. It's good for getting eyeballs, but it's only good if you have something for the eyeballs to consume or look at. And one of the problems that Kamala Harris grappled with, if we cast our minds back to the brat summer of 2024, etc., was that it felt really light in terms of ideas and policy, and quite dissatisfying. And so it was a kind of trend that caught your eye, but then there wasn't that much, some people would disagree, but others would say, oh, there wasn't that much to it really. Whereas with Donald Trump, it felt like the ideas that are being represented through his different social media posts and strategies are clear. Again, whether you like or hate them, they are very clear. And I think that will be the test for Gavin Newsom. He can use this kind of satire to draw people in, or to give an impression of what he's like as a person, doesn't take himself too seriously, is willing to sort of face up to Donald Trump, all those kinds of messages. But those are ultimately a little bit futile if there's not more to go on. And I would say that I'm really interested by when we heard that clip from him, and how he was talking about the democracy stuff and the threat to democracy, and we're here because of January the 6th. Like, if he's going to go down that route, the kind of Donald Trump is a threat to democracy thing, that didn't really work out like last time around. Actually, it felt like people kind of had got over it. They were like, man, was it really? Again, regardless of what you actually think about whether it was, it didn't feel like it landed in the same way as points about the economy or immigration do. And I just wonder whether he risks falling into a trap that other Democrats have before, which is actually the whole Trump is a threat to you doesn't really do very well when you're trying to win over that middle group of people who voted for him last time.
Yeah, and that's kind of been a challenge for Newsom. And if you track what he's been doing over the past few years, he actually started a podcast, and on that podcast, he was bringing on conservatives like Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk, and got a lot of criticism for platforming people that Democratic primary voters who are going to be casting their ballots in the presidential election in 2028 just revile. So he actually seemed like he was costing himself some support within the Democratic Party by appearing to transparently move to the middle and reach out to possibly Trump voters, or at least engage in dialogue with them. Also, early on this year, when Donald Trump came out to visit and review the fire damage in Los Angeles, Newsom met him on the tarmac. They shook hands. They talked about how they could work together. So it seemed like in the beginning, Newsom's strategy was conciliation and working with Trump, and also reaching out to right-wing voters. And then you get this kind of handbrake turn, and part of it was because of the immigration enforcement in California and the National Guard. All of a sudden, Newsom was put in a position where he felt like he had to object to what Donald Trump was doing, this massive intervention at the federal level in Los Angeles after these demonstrations. And since then, that's when he has been tacking back to the left with this social media strategy and these sharp criticisms of Donald Trump. And he has now been getting criticism from some people who say, well, you're using your social media feed in order to engage in mockery and kind of belittlement when a state governor should be using it for things like informing the public about emergency issues or fires or as a means of communication. He actually responded to that as well. And this is what Newsom had to say.
If you've got issues with what I'm putting out, you sure as hell should have concerns about what he's putting out as president. So to the extent it's gotten some attention, I'm pleased. But I think the deeper question is, how have we allowed the normalization of his tweets through social posts over the course of the last many years to go without similar scrutiny?
So wait a minute. And now he's saying this is all just an attempt to draw attention to how bad Donald Trump is with his social media. And so it's not just to go toe to toe, but to start a serious conversation. I mean, that's a criticism of Gavin Newsom, right? Is that he's a little vapid, he's a little superficial, and he tends to go whichever way the wind blows. And now just what I've outlined. I mean, we're going back and forth several times.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but the thing is that there is this Donald Trump exception, which I don't think we can ever get around, and no other politician, certainly that we've seen yet, is going to ever be able to replicate, where he can do outrageous things, whether it's on his social media feed or ridiculous things he says at rallies, whatever it is, and he gets away with it because he's Donald Trump in a way that absolutely nobody else could. They would be called ridiculous, they would be called hypocritical, they would be laughed out of town, but somehow Donald Trump, he's just able to shrug it off, and it's all part of his appeal. And of course, it's that sort of reach across appeal that I guess the likes of Gavin Newsom are trying to replicate by, as you said, Anthony, having Steve Bannon and Charlie Kirk on his podcast. The problem with that, he took some heat for it here on Americast as well as in other places, was that he sounded far too chummy with them. Like he was really deliberately trying to point up what friends they were rather than having a discussion of the issues about where they disagreed. I mean, I think the key thing any of these people, any of these wannabe challenges have to do, I don't know what you think about this, Mariana, is a much, much more deeper conversation, probably on these right-wing podcasts, on Joe Rogan or whatever else it is that Republicans have successfully been getting their message out to people who are not political junkies. Who among these Democratic contenders can sit for 3 hours and talk to Theo Vaughn or Joe Rogan and be amusing but be persuasive and disagree, but instead of getting into a punch up? That's surely that's the magic sauce, the secret sauce, isn't it, that you're going to need going into 2028.
One tiny last thing from me, but I do think is, we are talking about this, thinking about the kinds of people that do engage with alternative media or podcasts, don't like traditional media. But I always think that we shouldn't, and I know that we don't do this, but it's worth saying, underestimate people, because actually the reason people turn to those outlets is just because it's like the normal way of consuming content now. But there is a huge amount of appetite, and we know this ourselves, for like really sort of thoughtful, more discursive conversation. And I think that there's an ability to appeal again to voters, if you were the Democrats, through actually, like, we're not going to go toe to toe with Donald Trump, we're not going to fight fire with fire, but we're going to develop our own strategy that actually feels like a bit of a breather from this like constantly angry social media world that everyone else is inhabiting. There's probably a way of doing that that could be quite clever, but no one's worked out how to do it. So when they do, we'll talk about it, if they ever do.
That's it for today. If you want to listen to any of our other episodes, you can find them wherever it is you get your podcasts. Bye-bye.